Roman Reigns has just made a heart-wrenching announcement in response to Seth Rollins' devastating health news. Is this truly the end of an era? In this emotional WWE update, we dive deep into the shocking backstage moment where Roman Reigns addresses the WWE Universe following the tragic diagnosis of his former Shield brother, Seth Rollins. What started as a routine promo quickly turned into something far more personal and possibly final. A quiet chill had settled over the backstage halls of WWE, not from the air conditioning, but from something deeper. Something unspoken. Whispers had replaced laughter. Glances had become stares. And somewhere, in the silence between celebration and sorrow, Roman Reigns stood, motionless, staring at the phone in his hand. The message was brief. Just a few words. But it shattered him like nothing else in the last decade of his career. Seth Rollins wasn't coming back. Not now. And maybe, not ever. This wasn't just an injury. This was something darker. Something career-defining. A tragedy hiding behind layers of stubborn pride, cracked bones, and the wear and tear of being the backbone of a generation. They called him the visionary. The architect. The champion that never stayed down. But even the strongest structures collapse under enough pressure. And this time, the collapse came not with a scream, but with a silence that echoed louder than any arena. The moment itself had been captured. Yes, like all things in WWE, it happened under the spotlight. Saturday night's main event. A title defense. A routine performance on the surface. But Rollins hadn't looked right from the start. His steps were hesitant. His smile forced. And then, a pivot, a twist, a landing gone wrong. His leg buckled. The crowd roared in confusion. He didn't cry out. He didn't reach for the ropes. He just stopped. Frozen in the ring, clutching his knee as the referee checked on him. Commentators filled the air with concern, but backstage, panic spread like fire. Triple H was already standing. Becky Lynch had left gorilla position. And Roman just watched the monitor, arms crossed, face unreadable. They were rivals. Brothers. Enemies. And yet, in that moment, none of that mattered. The man who shared his rise, who once stood beside him in tactical gear as a brother in arms, now laid on the canvas, broken in a way even time might not fix. Initial reports were vague. A torn ligament. Possible MCL involvement. Then the medical scans came in. And everything changed. It wasn't just a tear. It was devastation. Seth Rollins had suffered a complete knee collapse, ACL rupture, MCL shredded, meniscus torn. A triple hit. A diagnosis so severe that one physician was overheard saying, "That's not a wrestling injury. That's a car crash." Recovery would be brutal. 9 months at best. A year more likely. But even then, no one could guarantee he'd be the same. The spring in his step. The explosive torque of his stomp. The risk-taking agility that made him beloved. All of it was now in question. And in that space of doubt, WWE changed. Not publicly, not yet. But in the halls, in the whispers, in the eyes of those who knew what was at stake, a new era was quietly beginning. One without Seth Rollins. But this story isn't just about an injury. It's about what happens when greatness breaks. When the face of a brand is told to step away. When time, the very thing he outran for years, finally catches him. And it's also about Roman Reigns, because Reigns, long seen as the indomitable force of WWE, the tribal chief, the symbol of dominance, was never known for emotion. He fought in silence. He ruled with steel. But behind that armor was something else. A history. A bond. A war shared with Seth Rollins that neither of them ever fully healed from. Sources backstage say Roman didn't speak to anyone for 24 hours after Seth's diagnosis. He skipped press. Cancelled an internal meeting. Didn't even respond to Heyman's messages. He just left. Flew to Florida. And sat, alone, at a beach house no one knew he still owned. The same house he bought in 2013, the year the Shield exploded onto the scene. The place they all once celebrated their first WrestleMania. Insiders say Roman didn't weep. He didn't punch walls. But he stared at his old gear bag for hours. Touched the original Shield vest. Rewatched their debut. And then he made a call, not to Vince. Not to creative. But to Seth. The call didn't go through, not because Seth was ignoring him, but because, according to Becky Lynch, he was sedated. Post-surgical pain management. A state of haze and heartbreak. The message Roman left was short: you were the fire. You always were. I don't care about the title. Just come back whole. It's not something fans would expect to hear from the tribal chief. But Roman Reigns is more than the character. He's a man who's watched too many of his brothers fall. From Ambrose walking away, to the real-life loss of Brody Lee, to the fractures of the bloodline. And now, the last true piece of his wrestling origin was gone. Temporarily, maybe. But it felt final, and so the silence that followed wasn't just grief. It was a reckoning, because for Roman, this wasn't just Seth's injury. It was a reminder. A flashing red light that no one, no matter how powerful, how popular, or how battle-tested, is immune from collapse. And that's when he started saying goodbye, not publicly. Not in the ring. But privately, in his own way. He cancelled bookings. Declined a planned feud. Told WWE officials he was re-evaluating his commitments. He started spending more time with his kids. Skipping workouts. Talking more to his father, Sika. Sources close to the Inoue family say Roman began questioning what he was still fighting for. Whether the legacy was worth the cost, because what happened to Seth wasn't random. It was years of carrying the company on his back. Years of pushing through pain, of taping up knees, of smiling through injuries. And Roman knows that road. He's walked it. He's still walking it. But for how much longer? That question hung heavy over the locker room when Roman returned briefly to SmackDown the week after Seth's injury. He didn't cut a promo. He didn't speak at all. He walked out mid-segment, stood on the stage, looked at the empty seat at commentary where Seth once sat during guest spots, and then walked back. A single glance. That's all he gave the crowd. But those who knew him understood what it meant, and then, something changed. Something no one expected. Roman submitted a request to WWE management. He wanted time off, indefinite. Not a vacation. Not a storyline break. A real one. A goodbye, not forever. But enough to face what he feared most, that the walls around him, the image of invincibility, were cracking. And if he didn't step back now, he might fall the same way Seth did, not with fireworks and applause. But with a stretcher, a silence, and a career hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, Seth Rollins lay in recovery. His leg braced. His future uncertain. And Roman? He was writing letters. One of them was never meant to be read aloud. But someone in WWE Creative leaked a portion of it. I mocked you too much. Fought you too long. But brother, you made me better. Every day. And if this is the last time we lace boots in the same ring, I want you to know, I was never the top guy because of titles. I was the top guy because you pushed me there. That letter was folded, sealed, and hand-delivered to Becky Lynch. She reportedly didn't respond. But she kept it, and the next time Roman stepped into the Performance Center, he wasn't there to train. He was there to watch Seth. Sit quietly, as Rollins tried to flex a leg that wouldn't move. Trainers say Roman never said a word. He watched. Then walked out, but the next day, he released a statement through WWE.com. It didn't mention titles. Or championships. Or the bloodline. It was just this: Seth Rollins made me. If he's stepping away, so am I. Not forever. But for now, the ring can wait. Fans were stunned. For the first time in a decade, Roman Reigns wasn't planning his next conquest, he was planning his absence, and the WWE Universe was left with one chilling reality: two of the greatest warriors of their generation were now on the sidelines. One broken in body, the other, in spirit, and the war they once fought against each other had given way to something far more painful. The war within. What followed Roman's quiet exit wasn't an announcement. It wasn't even a tribute. It was silence, the kind that echoes louder than any pyrotechnic. WWE, for all its spectacle and storylines, suddenly found itself missing two of its cornerstones. Rollins, the relentless engine of innovation. And Reigns, the immovable foundation of dominance. The creative team scrambled. Headlines shifted. SummerSlam was rewritten. But the void couldn't be filled, not by a new main event, not by any faction war. Because this wasn't just a storyline pause. It was the collapse of an era backstage. The conversation shifted from booking sheets to personal concerns. Triple H, always the architect of reinvention, was said to have taken both absences personally. In a private meeting with senior officials, he reportedly said, "I pushed them. Maybe too hard. But I thought they were indestructible." There was no blame, just reflection. Because behind every character is a human. And behind every chant, a cost. Medical updates about Seth Rollins remained minimal. But those close to him painted a sobering picture. His leg was healing, slowly. He had begun mobility training, but every small gain came with excruciating pain. The first time he stood unaided, it was only for 17 seconds. And even that was a battle. His therapists described him as determined but haunted. He wasn't just fighting to walk. He was fighting to reclaim a future he wasn't sure still existed, and then there was the question he refused to ask out loud. What if I can never wrestle again? Roman asked it for him, in his own way, not in front of cameras. Not in the ring. But through the people who mattered. He called Paul Heyman not to scheme. Not to rebuild the bloodline, but to talk. Just two men, one phone call, and an hour of truth. Sources say Roman was reflective, vulnerable. That he confessed to Heyman he no longer feared losing to younger stars, he feared becoming what Seth now was. Broken before the final chapter could be written. Paul, ever the tactician, reportedly offered a lifeline. Then write a new chapter. One with him. One that doesn't end in a ring. And Roman listened. For the first time in over a decade, he began considering something unthinkable: retirement. Not immediate. Not official. But the thought crept in. What if the match that never got its final act? Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins, one last time, was never meant to happen. What if the story had already ended? And that's when the idea surfaced. A farewell tour. Not for Roman alone. But for both. Whispers began backstage of a shared send-off. A symbolic goodbye. Not a fight. But a tribute. Two men who built the empire, stepping away together. Whether that will happen remains unclear. But what we do know is this: the moment Seth Rollins' knee gave out, something far greater collapsed with it. The balance of power in WWE. The illusion of invincibility. The belief that these men could carry the company forever. And for Roman Reigns, that collapse forced him to confront what he's been running from since day one: the idea that strength doesn't mean never falling. It means knowing when it's time to stop. In the week since, Roman has been seen less. No press appearances. No training videos. But one moment was captured, quietly, by a fan near Pensacola. A black SUV pulled into the driveway of Roman's family home. He stepped out. No cameras. No security, just him, in jeans, with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and beside him, a folded letter. Clutched in his hand, eyewitnesses say he walked to the mailbox and placed it inside. A letter addressed not to WWE but to Seth. The only word on the front: brother. We may never know what it said. We may never see them fight again. But what remains, what has always remained, is the truth behind the curtain. These weren't just superstars, they were men who gave everything, and in giving everything, they left nothing for themselves. So now, as Roman Reigns steps into the silence, and Seth Rollins begins the long road back from injury, we are left with one question: not who's next, but what's left of them, of their bond, of the era they defined. And when, or if, we hear their music hit again, will it be for a fight, or a farewell? Only time will tell, and time is running out. The sun had barely risen over the Montecito Hills when Seth Rollins finally opened his eyes, not to applause, not to camera flashes, but to the sterile white ceiling of a California recovery ward. His leg, braced and elevated, pulsed with pain. The room was quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor and the occasional shuffle of nurses beyond the curtain. He didn't know what day it was. He didn't know who had called. But he knew something had changed. Becky sat quietly in the corner, her eyes hollow, fingers wrapped around a wrinkled letter. Roman's words. She hadn't told Seth yet. Not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know how. How do you tell your husband, the man who rebuilt himself from ruin time and time again, that his greatest rival was no longer preparing to defeat him, but preparing to walk away too? Seth whispered her name. She stood. "You're awake," she said. He nodded. There was a moment of stillness. Then, softly, she said, "Roman wrote." He looked at her. "What did he say?" Her voice cracked. "He's done, Seth. He said goodbye." Silence, not the silence of confusion. Not the silence of denial. But the silence of a man who already knew, because when his knee gave out that night, it wasn't just the ligament that tore. It was everything, the possibility of one last match, the unsaid things, the redemption arc. He had planned one more bout. One more main event. One more time to remind the world who he was. Now, all of that was slipping away, and yet, he didn't cry. He just nodded. "He's right," Seth whispered. "We gave them everything." Becky didn't respond. She just sat beside him, held his hand, and watched a decade of dreams flicker and fade behind his tired eyes. Elsewhere, Roman Reigns walked alone along the beach. His phone off. His schedule clear. For years, his life had been ruled by red carpets, title defenses, and the ceaseless demands of being the tribal chief. But now, all of that seemed distant. Even foolish. Because none of it mattered when the people who helped build your legacy began to fall. He thought of Seth. Of Dean. Of Jimmy and Jay. Of his own body, the inflammation in his joints, the nagging pain in his lower back, the quiet warnings from doctors that he kept ignoring. Maybe this was the final sign. Maybe it was time to end it on his own terms, not in a storyline, not in a hospital, but with dignity. A farewell match had been floated. WrestleMania. A torch passing. But Roman refused. This wasn't about a finale. This was about letting go. Still, he left the door open, just a crack. A simple message sent through Triple H: "If he walks again, and he still wants to fight, I'll be there. One last time. Just for him." And that was it, a pause, a goodbye, maybe temporary, maybe not, but a moment in history. Back in the hospital, Seth stared out the window. The California sky was cloudless, indifferent. He reached for the letter again, reread it in silence. Then he asked Becky, "Do you think he means it?" Becky hesitated. "I think he's tired, Seth." Seth nodded. "Yeah," he said. "So am I." In that moment, neither of them were performers. They weren't champions, or legends, or icons. They were just two people, one in recovery, the other watching him break, both haunted by the sacrifices that no one ever talks about in the ring. Fame had come. So had fortune, but at what cost? A torn knee. A broken spirit. A goodbye that may come too soon. WWE, of course, would move on. New stars. New belts. New chants. But for the generation that grew up on the Shield, on the architect versus the head of the table, on curb stomps and spears and sold-out arenas, something irreplaceable had been lost. And as the weeks passed, Roman disappeared completely. No sightings. No press, just silence, until one day, months later, Seth received a package. Inside, a single dog tag, the original, from their debut in 2012. Attached was a note: "For whatever happens next. You were never my enemy. You were my beginning." No signature, none needed. Because some bonds, no matter how fractured, never truly break. They bend. They twist. They fade, but they remain, and whether or not Seth Rollins ever walks back into that ring, whether or not Roman Reigns ever raises another title, the legacy they built together will echo through every corner of that arena. A legacy forged in fire, and ended, not with a match, but with a goodbye. Weeks passed. The WWE Universe, always hungry, moved on, or at least tried to. New feuds were booked. Braun Breaker surged forward. Cody Rhodes took center stage. The lights were still bright, the crowd still deafening. But something was missing. A presence. A gravity. The kind only two men could bring, and both were gone. Roman Reigns. Seth Rollins. One walking away. The other fighting just to walk again. In the locker rooms, their names lingered like ghosts. Younger stars whispered about them with reverence. Production crew left their names etched in dry erase marker on the talent board, as if erasing them would make the absence real. Corey Graves once said off-air, "It feels like the heart of this place just stopped beating." And in many ways, it had. Seth Rollins was discharged in late August. He returned home, not to a press conference or a training montage, but to a couch, a brace, and a regimen of rehabilitation that would break lesser men. Twice a day, he fought through agony just to lift his leg a few inches. It was humiliating. It was maddening. But it was necessary. His son once asked him, "Daddy, why can't you run like before?" Seth smiled and replied, "Because I'm learning how to be strong in a new way." But in private, those words crushed him. He kept Roman's dog tag on his nightstand. Never wore it. Just stared at it. Some nights, he'd reach for it before falling asleep. Other nights, he'd wake up in a sweat, reliving the collapse. The twist, the pop, the numbness, the ceiling of that ambulance. And always, the thought, what if I never hear that crowd again? But healing has strange rhythms. It doesn't move in straight lines, and by October, something changed. A video surfaced online, grainy, likely from a distance. Seth Rollins, walking slowly, gripping parallel bars at a private rehab facility. Sweat pouring down. Mouth clenched. One step. Then another. The internet exploded. Fans tweeted, "He's coming back." Others whispered, "Don't push him." But amidst the noise, one man stayed silent. Roman.no statements. No social media. No reaction until Halloween. WWE posted a cryptic teaser.no logos. No names, just the sound of boots walking, and then, a whisper one more time. Nothing else. The community erupted. Could it be? Was Roman planning a return? Was Seth ready? No one knew for sure, but then a date appeared. Survivor Series, not as a match, not even as a competition, but as a tribute night. To the brotherhood. To the bond, to the war, to the peace. Survivor Series, Legacy. One segment. Unannounced, the lights dimmed halfway through the event. The single spotlight hit the stage. Roman Reigns walked out. No title. No entrance music, just silence. He looked out across the arena. 1,000 flashlights pointed back at him. Then, he spoke, "I wasn't supposed to be here tonight." Pause. "I was supposed to be somewhere quiet. Far away." Done. He breathed, but something changed. The crowd listened, silent. I watched a man fall. And then I watched him rise. On the screen behind him, grainy footage played, Seth Rollins taking his first unassisted steps. Holding onto a crutch. Then letting go. The arena erupted. Roman turned to the screen. His eyes didn't leave it. "I told myself I'd walk away before this place broke me. But I also told myself, if he stood again, I'd stand with him. One last time." The crowd chanted, "One more match. One more match." Roman waited. Let them chant. Then he said, "Not for the titles. Not for the legacy. For the man who made me better. Seth." Survivor Series 2026. One last time. The place exploded. Cameras cut backstage. Seth Rollins, watching from a skybox, stood slowly, no words, just tears, because in this business, very few endings are earned, and even fewer are shared. But what Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns built wasn't just a rivalry. It was a bond, forged in chaos, tempered by war, sealed by mutual destruction, and now, perhaps, healed. One match, one story, one final chapter, because in the end, every dynasty must face its twilight, and for these two kings, the sun was setting. Together, the build-up to Survivor Series, Legacy wasn't hyped in traditional WWE fashion. There were no flashy promos, no contract signings, no sneak attacks. Just silence. Respectful, deafening silence. Roman Reigns vanished again after his message on Halloween night. No follow-ups. No backstage appearances. He didn't need to say more. He had spoken his truth. One final match. Not for the glory. Not for the gold. But for the man who once stood beside him in a riot vest, and later across from him, holding a chair. Seth Rollins, for his part, didn't need to be convinced. The footage of him nodding backstage, hand pressed to his heart, was replayed over and over on social media. In a rare interview days later, Becky Lynch confirmed what the world suspected: he's not 100%. He may never be. But he told me something I'll never forget: if I don't do this, I'll regret it until I'm in the grave. Survivor Series 2026. Chicago. A sold-out arena. No title match announced. No Bloodline, no Judgment Day, no interference, just one main event, confirmed 2 weeks before the show: Seth Rollins vs. Roman Reigns, The Last Dance. The pre-show promo was a simple black and white montage. No music. Just the sound of breath, Roman punching a locker, Seth lacing his boots. A glimpse of the old Shield entrance, and then, the line: "This isn't about who wins. It's about who's left." That night, the locker room was different. Quiet. Respectful. Sami Zayn wore his old Shield hoodie. Cody Rhodes stood near Gorilla, arms crossed, silent. Triple H hugged both men before they walked out. And in the front row, for the first time since 2014, Dean Ambrose sat in the crowd. No announcement. No music. Just presence. The arena went dark. A heartbeat echoed, then, the old Shield siren. The crowd lost it. Out came Roman Reigns, not in his tribal chief gear, but in the tactical vest. The original boots. Black gloves. No crown. No title, just Roman. Then came Seth. No flashy robe. No flames. Just black pants, a taped-up knee brace, and a stare that pierced the soul. The bell rang. For a moment, neither moved. They stood, frozen. Two gladiators at the edge of everything. 10 years of storylines. Of wars. Of betrayal and brotherhood. All culminating here. The lockup was slow. Careful. Respectful. Each move echoed with purpose. Each slam carried history. Roman targeted the knee, not cruelly, but as if testing Seth's will. Seth winced with every step, but he didn't falter. Every near fall drew gasps, every kick out earned tears. At the 20-minute mark, Roman whispered something, the mic barely caught it: "I'm proud of you." Seth didn't reply. He just headbutted him, and the match continued. In the final moments, Roman stood above Seth, poised for the spear. He hesitated. The crowd rose. Then, Seth collapsed before he could charge. Not from pain. Not from exhaustion. But from peace. Roman dropped to his knees. They looked at each other. Then Roman, in an unscripted move, laid down. Let Seth pin him. Seth Rollins sat up, stunned. Roman stayed down, breathing heavy. Then, slowly, he smiled. Seth extended his hand. Roman took it. They stood together. No pyro. No betrayals. Just two men who had been through everything, and somehow survived. Together, the crowd chanted, "Thank you, Roman. Thank you, Seth." Backstage, Triple H wept. Dean Ambrose, in the crowd, saluted, and WWE quietly closed a chapter that defined a generation. The next morning, Roman posted a single photo: "The Shield, 2014." Caption: "We carried it. We bled for it, now it's yours, goodbye." Seth reposted it, with one word: brotherhood. And just like that, it was over, not with fire, not with betrayal, but with grace. A fitting end for two legends. It wasn't meant to end this way. Not for them, not for the brothers who once walked through the crowd shoulder to shoulder, faces